At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
All right. Well, of course we've got rational thoughts, but I love that bumper because it's a little bit funny for me. I guess enjoy that. And today's man, I always say I'm excited about my guests, right? I always say the same thing, but today I really mean it. No, I've always meant it, but it's a very, very big honor to introduce somebody who has actually impacted your life already, and you don't even know it, right? How can I know that? Well, his resume, his bio is actually several pages long. We don't have time to read that. So I'm going to just go on the back of his book for a little bit here so you get a feel for this guy, all right? He founded a company you've heard of called stamps.com, right? It's a NASDAQ registered company and, provide internet shipping and mailing solutions, right? He's a successful venture capitalist, and he's raised over $450 million in public and private offerings for stamps, investments, and IAB holdings. He graduated with honors in mechanical engineering from the Coimbatore Institute of Technology in India. He has an MS degree in aeronautics from California Institute of Technology and a PhD in astrodynamics from control from UCLA. He studied law at the University of West Los Angeles, a member of the California Bar since 1986. And when I say he's affected our lives, folks, I mean, he's so humble about this, but yeah, he's worked at like a lot of agencies with 3 letters in it, but one 4-letter agency called NASA, where they invented a little thing, him and his team invented a little thing called GPS. Maybe you've heard of that. So he's already impacted our lives tremendously. He's about to do it again and a bunch of things he's got coming up. So I'd like to introduce to you my good friend and guest, Mohan Ananda. Mohan, how are you today?
Thank you, Doug. It's so kind of you to be so generous. Thanks again.
Yeah. So your book, you can hold up your copy too. We can show our book covers, right? Hold up your book. There we got it. Look at that. Autobiography of an Immigrant, right? And that's your name. I don't think that's your picture there, though.
No. It's a good-looking Indian.
We chose a good-looking girl instead of your face. I don't know why. You're a good-looking man, but she's better.
It's a much better-looking Indian.
Yeah, right? And I love this cover, not the fact that we designed it, but the fact that it does show it's an autobiography of an immigrant with the American flag and this beautiful woman from India, right? No relation, but yeah, she's more, she catches your eye faster. And I got to say something, it's like we do a lot of books for people, and very rarely do we do memoirs, autobiographies, because most people just, they had a life, they've done a few things, but they didn't play on the lawn with Indira Gandhi. They didn't invent GPS. They didn't go public with a $6.6 billion company. So you doing a memoir is actually very appropriate. But I'd like to find out, because you're still working. You got more things coming up here. So why did you choose now to write this book?
Thank you. Thank you. I didn't, choose now in the sense. What really happened was, I've always wanted to write a book which will become like a historical thing for my family, my children, my grandchildren, and the lineage thereafter. So I thought it would be good, coming from India. They may not have all the information. That's the original thought of the writing the book. The concept came. And then it's not the primary activity because I was always busy doing other things, but slowly but steadily I write few pages now and then later. So it took almost 2 years to finish the book. And in the last year, because of the pandemic, though, my travel became less, and that kind of helped to expedite the process. And obviously the book came out about a week back, and I've had a very, very interesting and good feedback that people enjoy the book. So there is something interesting there. And
quite interesting. It's I've often joked, I said you're like the Indian version of Forrest Gump. You've met Bobby Kennedy, the Gandhis. You've been around the block. You've met a lot of historical people, and what you've done, however, is the most interesting thing to me is that you've been involved in historical moments in business with the things you've touched and been involved with. So I just mentioned too the GPS thing and stamps, but there's a bunch of other things you've done too in terms of, you mentioned cloud computing and AI and robotics. So of all the things you've seen in the past and been involved with, which is the one that you're most interesting to you?
That's a tough question. That's a really difficult question. Initially, I'm being an astrophysicist, so I'm more interested at the time when I was young, more looking at the universe as generally looking at the whole planetary system. And I was kind of in the mini research team in the gravitational theory, the gravity. That was my interest. So in order to get the information about the more about gravity, we were at NASA, JPL, we were having missions to various planets. I mean, going to the planet is to understand about even though it is going around Mars or Venus or some other planet, it is to understand more about the geophysics, how the Earth was formed. And in order to understand that, you want to know what the Earth gravitational field is. So it's very abstract theory, and that science, astrophysical science, was my interest initially. And of course, I started contributing in the area of navigating to the various planets in order to navigate. In fact, I coined the term originally called autonomous navigation. This has to be autonomous to the extent where, when you go to like a Mars, for example, you want to get into the Mars orbit. How do you insert into Mars orbit? How accurately you can, if you make an error, it'll go somewhere else. So then you lose the whole satellite. So those are something I got interested in. And then I, of course, got into GPS. The GPS is a kind of a continuation of that interplanetary navigation, because navigation is knowing places. So GPS, in the early conceptual stage, it's purely a defense system, meaning it's a weapon system. How do you augment the weapons to accurately navigate to the target? So if you want to, for example, and a missile wants to bomb a particular silo or a particular building, you have to have a clear navigation system. Otherwise, you may waste. So you don't want to waste the weapon system. So the GPS is used to that, and in order to be that, GPS has to be secure. So that's some of the areas I worked on, and those are amazingly complex. Same time, it's very challenging and very satisfying, and you also feel you have contributed to the society at large, not to have a war, but to prevent war. Meaning, if you have better weapon system, probably there is no conflict. So those are some of the really interesting work I have done.
Yeah, I remember when GPS first came out. I'm a private pilot, and they said, "Well, we're gonna make it so you can navigate, generally speaking, but you can't get too narrow because that's, you said, military and proprietary." But then they changed it, and they said, "You know what? We're gonna go ahead and make it so it's accurate to within a few feet, so my Uber driver knows where I'm standing now." What happened when I know it used to be more secure, where they had it was looser, it wasn't really that accurate, and then they made it accurate for the public. How did they decide to make that change?
I think that's an incident in during the Reagan administration. What happened was there was a real airline, which was flying, a Korean airline, flying over the Russia by mistake, and the Russians shot it down. And almost 400 people died. And Reagan that day determined to give GPS to the private, meaning everybody. Wow. He said full accuracy to the because if there was GPS at the time in that plane, that would not have happened, because the navigation GPS is extremely accurate. I mean, as you said, it's as good as less than a feet or even less. So, but here they kind of went off hundreds of miles by their their different system. So that prompted, and subsequently it became all the full accuracy is available to anybody. I mean, in fact, even some of the other countries use GPS. The potentially our adversaries can get the GPS as well.
That's right. They open sourced it. So Mohan, you're astrophysicist, you're an attorney, you're entrepreneur, and you've also raised billions of dollars for different things. I'm really curious about the other values that people need to know about of your book. Certainly it's a legacy book for your family, but you cover a lot of things there that I think entrepreneurs can also learn from. Can you mention some of those things about the looking towards the future for our business?
Yes, I have two real additional objectives. The first is the legacy for my children, but the two other real objectives is because of my kind of vast experience. I came as a young person in Pasadena, here in California, in 1967. So it's 54 years. So this is quite a long experience, and I believe it's a very productive experience. So I think my whatever I have learned, I tried to put that into the book for one, all young people. Every young person, I think it will be valuable to read. That will give them the certain appreciation of somebody who went through coming from a foreign country, come to a strange place, and the experiences of adopting it, and going through the daily life with the challenges, difficulties, maybe even some successes, and all those experiences presented in such a way it would become almost like a role model, or something to look at it, and maybe even follow some of the things I have done would be very valuable to the young people. That's the first objective. Then second objective is really those who want to start, whether you're young or middle-aged or even older, if you're going to start a company, even small business, or some really a business which will grow into multi-billion dollar companies. I think I have gone through that, and I have kind of showed some of the important elements to follow. So actually in the end of the book, I have certain advices, I kind of enumerated that can follow. But that experiences, especially in starting a business, as I always said, there are three important things. One is the people, the team. The second is the product or service what you're going to do, and the third obviously is the capital. All are important, but the team is the most important. I've gone through that aspect in the book very clearly, so that will give them idea how to actually pull it together. And as you grow, what all the things need to be done. For example, just to give a intellectual property, how do you value it, how do you make sure, and how that can be monetized properly. So there are a lot of ideas which may be very valuable, even though you may not do everything exactly the way I said. But this is more like in a way, it's like a cookbook. It's there, somebody has done it, and somebody has accomplished it. But one more thing, the failure is part of the game. There will be failures, but failures, you should not fall back and say, "Oh, I lost it, and I'm going to stop it and go." No, failure is an opportunity to learn. It's a step towards success. So that is very important. In fact, whenever somebody starts, there is a possibility. Everybody cannot really be successful instantly. There are, you will come back and say, "Okay, I lost this one, I lost that one," but you have gained the knowledge of. So I primarily put it more like even though it is an autobiography, it's more like a preparatory. I don't want to say it like a cookbook, but there is some similarity to that. I don't know whether I have addressed your question, Dak.
Totally, yeah. It's if as any entrepreneur, small, medium, or large entrepreneur, it's a great book to give you not just inspiration, but maybe not a recipe, but maybe like a roadmap or a blueprint on making sure that, yeah, that failure piece is can be discouraging, but you got to keep going. If you were going to talk to a young person, you know, somebody who's just getting into the career or going to college, one of the things I was fascinated with was obviously your past, what you've done, but also your vision for the future. A lot of people look at the future and they don't get a whole lot of good news out there. It's inflation and tension and divisiveness and culture wars, all that stuff. You know, you and we're positive people. I look towards the bright side of things. But in terms of business, if you were going to give a blank slate to somebody, is there a particular industry or skill set or something you'd recommend people look at?
Okay, that's a very good question. Let me just add on to what you said. I consider myself as a half full guy rather than half empty. Meaning that, you know, drinking the glass of water, you can say it's a half empty, or you can say it's a half full. I consider half full in the sense I see positive things in anything. There is always positive. I mean, there is always negative too. But if you don't believe in you, nobody else is going to believe in you more than, you know, you have to believe yourself. You think the thought process should come, I can do it. I will succeed. I will make it happen. That positive things give you positive vibration, and that positive things take you to the right destination. I mean, you do have to do planning. You need to know where you want to go. You need to come up with the roadmap. You need to have the navigation tools. You need to have the team. You need to have all the aspects, but you need to have the vision that I can accomplish. And I would say I am clearly one of the examples of that. For example, just to as we speak, just last week, I completed an IPO for $230 million, successful IPO of a SPAC. Most people don't know what SPAC is. Let me kind of just to take a little, you know, detour. The book has some, but I have not addressed because that was written before this whole process came into being. SPAC stands for, it's like a special purpose acquisition company, SPAC, and which is something new, but not really new. It was there for a few years, but it is become much more popular and much more valuable in the last 2 years. 2019, it's really became good, and 2020, it's really grew, and 2021 is actually grown much faster. And I'm going to make a prediction. Okay, but before that, I want that to be compared to SPAC is a way for private companies to go public through demerger. Whereas generally most people do, or most companies do, they go public directly through the IPO process. The IPO stands for initial public offering. That initial public offering is done through having an investment banker. They, you know, go through the SEC, the Security Exchange Commission has all kind of regulatory requirements. We have to meet all those things, and the investment banker presents you, goes through it, and then take to the actual market and get the market, raises the capital. That's the process. And I have done it 3 times before. I've done it in the NASDAQ for stamps.com, and I worked with Envestnet in the New York Stock Exchange and another company in London Stock Exchange. So I'm familiar with the IPO process. Now, SPAC is something, as we said, it's new. One advantage of SPAC is there is no company. There is no financials. There is no, people don't need to look at how much is your revenue, how much is your profit, what things are, how you grow. All are not there. As a matter of fact, in order to have the SPAC in place, you should not have any discussion with the potential companies you may want to bring in prior to raising the capital. And that's the requirement. So now I have raised this $230 million. So now I'm talking to companies, and companies where hopefully we will do the demerger, and the transaction is complete. And then that company becomes public. That's the process. So here, the reason I brought it up, in this, while I was working on the book, I was also working on this back adventure in the, because it's something new to me, I've not done before. But the most important thing is put the best team together. The best team meaning the capable, you have a board, the board of this corporation, and then you also need the partners. Like you need an investment banker, you need a co-sponsor, you need a good legal law firm supporting all the legal requirements. Even though I'm a lawyer, but I need a real guidance from the experts. Then you need a accounting help, and you need a auditor. So it's a lot of real experts in the field. Pull it together and go through, and we were extremely successful. In fact, I don't want to go into the details. When we went for 200 million, and we got significant oversubscription. That means people were happy about our team, and people were ready to put money in. They were betting on what we can accomplish going forward. So that was a very positive thing. So I don't know where I started, Doug. So I just want to give you that story about my experience, which is not really in the book that much, but that is kind of mentioned that I'm going to be involved. Now we are already in it, and we have come out, and now my job is to find the appropriate company for demerger.
Is what's the difference between a SPAC and just like a private equity firm that's got a bunch of money to go and buy something? What's the difference between those two? Is a SPAC public or?
Lot of difference. That's a very good question. It's a significant difference. When a private equity company buys, the company is still private.
Oh,
so you don't have any. Okay. For example, I did the private equity company buying. I had a public company to start with. The public company stamps.com was sold to a private equity for cashing out. You're cashing. See, we sold it for $6.6 billion, meaning they have to write a check for $6.6 billion. I mean, then they own it. They can do whatever they want. That's up to them. We don't have any now participation, as an example. But going through a SPAC, you are becoming a public company, meaning any value increase, you become, you don't get the cash, meaning you can liquidate 100%, but the growth is where you create wealth. The wealth creation is by growing. So good management want to succeed and grow, you have to go public and not to sell it. Another thing is when a company is bought by a private equity, or generally private equity transaction, the multipliers are small. I mean, I don't know that. Let me walk you through that scenario. Yeah. This may be interesting. Like if you have a grocery shop and you want to sell it to somebody that want to retire, you want to sell it. Generally, the value you get is the net profit times 3 or 4 or 5. That's the general value. And when the private equity, a bigger company takes private, it's still, you may get maybe 6, 7 or 8 or some valuation like that. But when you go to the public market, the valuation could be 12 or 15 times. So there is a very, very attraction to going public, because public means everything is open. There is no under the table handling, because everything has to be disclosed. You have to file periodic reports. It's fully audited, so you can trust. Of course, there are exchanges outside US. They don't do that much. But in the US market, we have a very, very strict, well-organized SEC, and they look for everything. They want to make sure. So you can trust. So people can invest without really worrying about. But private transactions, there is no such disclosure requirement. It's internal, it's between parties. But all public transactions are extremely open, transparent. So that because of that, that value is good, and the people, take it, you can benefit by it. So that is very important, that if you want to, do between the private equity transaction versus public transaction.
Okay, so yeah, the original question, and we got a great tangent. I love hearing about this stuff. Was a young person who wants to get involved. You mentioned about being, inspired, and not most of us don't have a team in place where we can go and raise $250 million. I'm guessing. I don't know. I guess I could try, but I think probably for the brand new entrepreneur, or maybe the person who wants to buy their first company. Either way, is there a particular industry or area that you like better than something else?
I'm into digital technology. Digital
Yeah.
technology meaning, when you have a hard assets, that will become capital intensive. That means you have to buy all the equipment, manufacturing, all kind of that requires much larger capital. That's an interesting path to take. That's not my kind of passion. I am into digital technology in the sense e-commerce, or uh, anything to do with internet using transactions, intelligence, artificial intelligence, or robotics, things which really involves the current state of the art, which we have a very, very high potential going forward. The future would be extremely, extremely valuable to them. That's where I am interested. So looking at any kind of uh, using technology, also healthcare technology. Health is, the conventional healthcare is, kind of very old, but the new technology delivery, even instrumentation and pharmaceutical, the analysis, research, all those are really happening using the current advanced technology, using artificial intelligence. So that's an area I
Yeah.
am interested.
Yeah, and I was talking to the chief data scientist for Intel a few months ago. I just got back from a conference where I met a bunch of people in your space, the startups and entrepreneurs raising capital, and the amount of new things coming out. I mean, one guy is a physician, and they've developed a way to actually start growing synthetically, like body parts, like cartilage, things that are really hard to like do. I'm like, is that 3D printing? He says, no, it's actual protein-based, cellular
Yes.
structures. They're gonna start growing. I'm like, this is a massive thing. And when I talk to like kids in college and whatnot, I say, number one, go read this book. And number two, the three things you mentioned when we talked about your book was cloud computing, AI, robotics, I think. But you don't have to be a scientist to get involved with this stuff. There's plenty of opportunities, not just in engineering and science, but in marketing, in finance and HR. Almost all skill sets are going to be involved with this new revolution we're certainly seeing right now. Would that be a fair statement?
Exactly. You cannot be knowledgeable in everything. It's not a
Well,
practical
you
thing, but
can.
it is good. No, not really. Not really. You have to be good in something, whatever that something is. You have to be an expert in that. But your ability to pull the team together, the best mind. If you go into, for example, artificial intelligence or cloud computing, just take those two. You have to have that initial knowledge what it is, but then everything else can be brought into as a team. And of course, when you bring people, it's extremely important to look at two things. One, can they work as a team? It's very, they have to have that integrity, honesty, those characteristics, and the team player. It has to be a team. It's individually you can't succeed. It's a teamwork. That's one. The second, they have to have their expertise in one area. For example, take lawyers. You do need a good legal uh, help, because we are living in a legal society means you have to meet all, like for example, going through SEC, you need to make sure that everything is done by the book. That means you need that expertise. Same like for example in accounting, everything has to be properly accounted for, and auditing has to be done, of course, internally, and you have to do it externally to get an objective audit. But you have to prepare everything so the external person can easily just look at it and make sure everything is okay. But you need to have the right team. And so, of course, marketing, customer acquisition is one of the most valuable things in growth. Whether I mean, people sometimes think, they will come to you, they will, we have such a great product, people will come to you. That may be true to some extent, but you need a good marketing, because the information has to be delivered to people. People have to know. Like even my book, I know it is a great book according to me, but some people have to know there is a book. So that marketing is an extremely important. So you need to have, like, I would generally recommend. In fact, the book says you need a chief executive officer, which is like the person who orchestrates the team together, like this symphony. He conducts the symphony music. But then you need a chief technology officer, because if it is technology based, and I'm suggesting, even if it is not technology based, you may need a chief technology officer. But then you need a chief financial officer, CFO. So for example, then you need a chief marketing officer, so that the marketing work would be done. And you even need, I think, a chief strategic officer. Needs to be a strategic partnership with people, other companies, and various customers, or even you may sell product with the help of the other partners. So you need a strategy. So there are different, depending on if you have a healthcare technology, you need a chief medical officer. So you need all kind of different caliber people put together. And it's a function of the product or service you're doing, but you do need a right team. So initially, when you start the company, you have to wear all the hats, because you don't have the luxury of the people as well as the capital. So, but then slowly but steadily, those people should be brought in, and they take responsibility, and then the company can grow together.
I interviewed a gentleman years ago who sold this company for $100 million. And I said, what's the key to success, right? How did you, if you could summarize this thing in a sentence or two? And he was very wise. He's been very, very similar to what you said. He goes, well, I only hire people that I'd be comfortable having over for dinner. And I never expect them, any expectations I have, if they get to 80%, that's good enough. Because no one is going to be working as hard as a founder. I'm sure you can agree with that. But if you like them, if you trust them, if you got a good vibe about them, that was his indicator. Now, it's pretty interesting when I see people build companies and put people on their team. A lot of time it's based on proximity or their past, right? It's like, hey, I know Fred from my previous job, let's bring him in. But is there any advice you'd give somebody in like vetting or putting together your all-star team? It sounds like it's very important. There must be you have a process for that, or is it instinct?
Okay, it's a combination of both. But let me tell you from my experience. I have put together a number of teams. Because a number of companies, and I've been maybe I'm lucky more than anything, but lucky that all the teams I put together, they lasted for a long time. Long meaning, like the stamps example. I started in 96, and I left in 2021. It's 25 years. Many of my initial people we brought together, they stayed along 20 years, 15 years, or 10 years. I mean, long term, depending upon the time when they came in. Generally, once they are there, they don't leave, because this is a ideal place to work. It's very challenging, very interesting. Also, you have to treat them very fairly. People don't work, of course, not just for the money, but you have to give them the respect. They come up with ideas. That's more than money. You can give them high salary or even a lot of stock options, but if we don't value their input, then it's not good. So because people are very creative, so you should recognize that the senior management or top person should not think it's my way or highway. No, these people would give ideas, and if you bring that into use, they are much more satisfied than high compensation or high bonus or high stock options. But of course, those things are essential, because that's the way they stay together. They want to feel like they own the company, they are part of the ownership. So that is very important. But in hiring, the first thing I look at it, of course, I come from a fairly good educational background, so it is very important. I mean, people those are not well qualified, we don't consider, because it's not then proper to work. So the background it's important. But more than that, the background alone is not enough. I have to, I mean, in my case, I always have a conversation with them. I mean, like a very social, having a dinner or lunch or conversation. I have to feel they are totally honest. Honesty, integrity, and being a team player. I mean, that ingredient is if they may make mistakes, there is nothing wrong. Everybody, I make mistakes. In fact, I've probably done more mistakes than many other people I know. So mistakes making is not a problem, but you have to be totally transparent. I mean, very the character of the integrity is extremely important, because if you have one member of the team is not good, then the whole thing is like almost like saying in the bucket of apples, one apple is rotten, then everything can get rotten. So that is one above and all. I look at them. I mean, that may be an instinct, because you can't really know how the person is real honest, but you get a feeling. And that part, not the education, is not the gut feeling. Those are that can be verified, validated, but the character is extremely important. So I kind of addressed, I think, your question, Doug.
Absolutely. And whoops, there we go. It's very vital actually to get the right person. A combination of instincts and some due diligence is always a good idea. Before we wrap up here on this amazing book, Autobiography of an Immigrant. Let me get the shining out. There we go. Autobiography of an Immigrant. Shameless plug here. We helped you with this book a little bit. So if you don't mind telling the audience what that experience was like in terms of the editing and the cover and launching and all that stuff. What was that like for you?
Oh, I consider Doug, but for Doug, this would not have happened. Let's put it that way. I mean, he has been instrumental, because I'm to some extent in these type of things very lazy, because this is not a priority, because this is more like a fun, and when you do fun, that becomes the last. But Doug has been, it's like a pillar in this process. And obviously the person who really did a lot of work with me is Jen. He is an amazing person. Of course, she's very pretty. That makes it better. And she has helped me to finish the book, and she did all the editing. And she will ask me what my input is, and we work as a team together. And that has been a wonderful. If anybody wants to write a book, my recommendation is, I mean, with no reservation, Doug did not tell me this. Call Doug and get Jen. Those two things, if you do, the product would become fantastic. I mean, we have to do some writing too, but those two are the more important ingredient.
Well,
Did I say it? I mean, I was not exaggerating. I just want to be totally, candid and truthful.
Thank you very much. We love working together. We're a great team, and working with interesting authors makes our job fun as well. But yeah, it is a business, of
So
course.
this
So
is a service you are doing. I mean, it's in a book is it's such a valuable thing. It lasts for ever. I mean, whatever that it has, So I think you making this thing to happen. In fact, you don't need to be a famous person or a capable, accomplished person. People should write because it's a story. Whether you're like a businessman made a lot of money, or
mhm.
person who has seen things just walking around. I mean, they should write their stories. And if somebody like if they meet Doug and make that happen, I think it is the children should read as many. Like my children and grandchildren, they read. In fact, they're like a bookworms. They read so many books. But it is important to have these things available. I mean, people
Mhm.
have to create. So what you're doing is an amazing service, no question
Uh,
about it.
Thank you very much. We got to wrap up. Well, I'm sure we'll talk again. I want to talk more about the SPAC stuff
Certainly.
actually. So let's
Yeah.
chat again in a few weeks and go through that stuff in detail. Folks, the book is called Autobiography of an Immigrant by Mohan. And man, it's a great read. It'll definitely inspire you. And Mohan, stick around a second. We're gonna close the show for today, but I want to ask you a quick question. We're done here. So thank you again. Appreciate you on the show today. Thanks.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. It is a pleasure being part of your. I mean, I've been on your show a few times. I mean, I would love to continue to be on those. Thanks again.
Always invited. Thanks. All right. That wraps up the show for today. Please go ahead and click below, subscribe, download some show notes. You'll get some good information there from Mohan, best-selling author, and man, what a luminary and a visionary. Thanks again. I'll see you later.